Good morning, Andre. Thanks, Colin. Colin, you must make at least one guest appearance today. There cannot be any ABSL event without you sharing something. Okay, perfect. I will get started. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Just bear with me. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it, yes.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. I'm Ilinca, and together with Elena, Andre, and Andre, we will be hosting today's session and sharing our research, our learnings, and our experience around the post-COVID workplace and how we believe we can seize the opportunity to make our offices even better. So for those of you that saw me speaking at the last ABSL conference, unfortunately today I cannot get the chance to make you take any psychological test or have you draw, but we hope, as I said before, to get the conversation started either during the presentation, because I will pause a few times to check if there's any questions from you in the Q&A section, or in the last 15 minutes of the session, and of course afterwards. So thank you, ABSL, for inviting me, and let's get started. So I will share four main things with you today. The first one is that I'll give you a very small glimpse into a piece of research that we will actually publish only next week around the misconceptions related to the future of the office and the realities that debunk them. So because the research is only being published next week, I will kindly ask you not to publish any information about it until then. I mean, it's not a Pentagon secret, but just for branding purposes. So thank you for that. Second of all, I will share our approach to navigating the post-COVID workplace, focusing on the now, the near, and the far. Then we will cover how we applied our own approach to our Cluj Business Center and also to our Munich Learning and Innovation Center. And last but not least, I will share our current, but of course, evolving thinking around what's next. So specifically how we can start to think about the far. So as I said, I cannot have you draw this time, but what I can do remotely is kindly ask you to answer a polling question. So this is my first time using Zoom polling, so bear with me. I'm pressing the launch button, so you should be seeing, and it would be great if you could confirm that you are actually seeing the poll. Oh, I have one answer, that's a nice confirmation. So the question is, to what degree are you comfortable with coming back to the office? Not at all, you're concerned, you cannot wait, you'd rather just stay at home, or you would like to balance the home and the office time. So far it's quite tight. I will give you a little bit more, a bit more than half of you have already voted. And almost there. So at the moment, balancing home and office time is in the lead. %78%. Let's get it across the 90. All right. So I will, hopefully it will work by, yes. Can you also confirm that you can see the results? Okay, perfect. So most of you would like to balance home and office time, which is interesting. And then it's very good that I will touch upon this balance within the next section of what I'm going to talk about. A few of you, not a lot, would rather continue working from home, which I think is quite normal and in line with what we see globally. So also a small amount of you are not comfortable at all with going to the office, and a reasonable amount have concerns, and also some of you cannot wait to get back. So I think it's quite clear that it is a mixed bag, right? But that there is something to the home office, right? That this experience was not entirely negative, even though it was quite challenging. So thank you for that. I'm going to move the poll out of the way. Let me know if it's disappeared. Perfect. So going back to having concerns or to what the balance between the home and the actual office is. So it's normal to have concerns, right? It's normal to be worried a bit about the return, because the reality is that most of our organizations were really not prepared for mitigating the spread of disease in the workplace. So we were prepared for employee safety in other ways, but not necessarily regarding the workplace. And there's several attributes of how our offices are set up that currently pose a lot of challenges. So of course, most of us work from open plan offices. Our real estate is quite compressed as our companies are struggling to balance cost and growth. A lot of our spaces are shared because either it's workstations or it's meeting spaces, because that was the purpose, right? To bring people together. We can work from anywhere within the office, and most of us actually move around quite a bit. We have cafeterias, we have coffee bars, we have social spaces to bring everyone together. And last but not least, we've tried in the past years to make the office even homier so that we can bring people closer to the organization and to one another. So while these challenges definitely need to be solved, and I will speak about that later, it's also important to remind ourselves why we built offices like this to begin with. So it was to support new ways of working, high levels of human interaction in order to be more creative, more innovative, faster, and more agile. It was a means to foster new work styles, build culture, and attract talent. So those things are arguably more important than ever right now as we enter or re-enter one of the most competitive business environments in recent history. But still, not everyone is convinced that we still need an office. And as some of you already indicated, the home office clearly should play and is playing a significant role. So I have a second question for you. And let me launch the poll again. Oh, I'm still seeing the second question. Maybe Christina, you can help me out to go to the second one. Yes, and voila, now you see it. Hopefully, I will know that as soon as I have at least one vote. So the question is, what is important to you as you return to the office? One answer, someone who wants to connect with their leader. I also would like to do that. So there's quite a few options here. You can choose more than one option. So it's to perform focused work, to reconnect with colleagues, to collaborate with team members, to get tools and technology access that you don't have at home, to simply get away because you need a change of scenery. I've been looking at the same white wall for 3 months. It's not the most inspiring. To connect with your leader, to reconnect with what your company actually does with the purpose that it's trying to achieve. And last but not least, to have better ergonomic support, which I know most of us are struggling with. So I'll also give you a few more seconds. All right, so thank you. And I'm gonna show the results now. Perfect. Okay, so collaborating with team members, not surprisingly, the most important reason why you would like to go to the office, and closely followed by reconnecting with colleagues. So people here is of course the red thread between the two. Connecting to the organization's shared purpose and having access to tools and technology seems to be important as well. And also the ergonomic support. Seems that performing focused work is the thing that we are okay-ish to do at home, or that we would like to continue doing in the future. And yeah, getting away from home and being in a different venue. So again, quite a mixed bag, which of course emphasizes the fact that we all have different situations at home, and we all have a very different type of work style in terms of how much we collaborate and how much we focus. So thank you for that. All right. So the idea here that I want to emphasize is that this crisis really threw millions of us into this mass experiment in working from home. And a lot of people are contending that we're quite productive, right? And we're productive, we're quite productive, or we report to be quite productive in what is arguably the worst case scenario for remote work. And why? Because we had to, right? We were forced to work from home, because the ones that we share our homes with were also forced to work from the same home. And on top of everything else, some of you also took on a second job, which is that of educating your children. So I very much admire all of you that were able to do that during this challenging time, or that are still doing that. So the reality is that we can work from home with some level of effectiveness. We can meet using platforms like Zoom, we can stay connected to colleagues, we can perform our tasks, and we can manage our work. We can, but it's just not the best idea. And the reality is that after months of living on video, the vast majority of us, so according to different studies, it's between 88 and 90%, actually want to have the option to return back to the office. Oops. But still, there are 3 common misconceptions that continue to fuel the notion that working from home all the time makes sense for everyone. So let's take them one by one, and I will share just one fact, kind of one reality, to debunk each of them. In our upcoming research that I mentioned next week, you will be able to dive deeper and have many more facts around each of them, or around why each of them are not per se reflecting reality. So let's take them one by one. Misconception number 1, it costs less to have people work from home. So it's true that reducing real estate, and it's obvious, right, that reducing real estate and other related workplace amenities can actually save money, but there are hidden costs to consider before you send everyone working full-time at home. Because the reality is that working from home is not possible for everyone, and people may actually leave. So it's mainly senior leaders that perceive working from home as widely successful, and the data tells a pretty disturbing story. Of course, executives and higher-ranking people have larger homes and have, most of them, dedicated and well-outfitted home offices, and they're doing fine. Their days are filled with video meetings, reviewing the work of others, but their teams and more junior people with smaller homes, with roommates, or with younger families are facing challenges that are not sustainable. Our research found that directors or above have more access than individual contributors to work-specific equipment. For example, 46% of directors have ergonomic chairs versus only 24% of individual contributors. Moreover, for people who don't have an optimal home office, eliminating the choice to work from an office may make that job opportunity on LinkedIn a little bit more tempting. There's also a study that shows that only 5% of people who often or very often or always work from home actually say that they will stay at their companies for their entire careers, versus 28% of people who never work remotely who say that they will stay at their companies for the rest of their careers. So that's one misconception and one reality. A second misconception is that people are just as or more productive at home as they are in the office. Now, that depends on how you define productivity, right? Some forms of work are easily accomplished at home, but true productivity of knowledge workers relating to creativity, innovation, transformation are notoriously difficult to measure in the short run, particularly during a pandemic, and they're incredibly hard to accomplish virtually. I am checking the chat. No, there's nothing happening on the chat for now. I was getting a notification. Sorry, I'm barely getting used to Zoom. So thanks for your understanding on that one. So this misconception is debunked by the reality that work actually is inherently social. Serendipity, or this unplanned, this mysterious unplanned, is completely absent online. And here I want to, I print screened it at the bottom of the slide. There's a Wall Street Journal article, The Science of Serendipity in the Workplace, that I highly recommend. It's not new, but it's more than relevant today. And I will come back to what it's about. So if you ask people what they miss most about the office, like I asked you today, most of you said things that have to do with people. So research at the moment is saying that about 70% of people say it's people why they are missing the office. And this isn't just a, feel-good soft metric, because work is inherently social. Research reveals that there's top 4 reasons why people want to return to the office. And again, these were perfectly reflected in the answers that you gave as well. It's to have scheduled meetings with colleagues, to socialize with colleagues, to have unplanned, impromptu, face-to-face interaction, and to be part of a community. Our interpersonal, our professional networks are shrinking as we limit ourselves to only interacting with little tiles of people with, you know, beach backdrops or potato avatars, which unfortunately, as a presenter now, I cannot see your little avatars, or I cannot see if anyone has turned themselves into a potato. But, you know, hallway conversations, the very elusive water cooler conversation is non-existent, and meeting new people is virtually impossible by working from home. So Steve Jobs, going back to this article that I referenced, Steve Jobs is famous for emphasizing the value of running into people. And he talked about something he called engineered serendipity. So he personally worked on the design of the layout of the Pixar floor plan to foster these unplanned interactions between employees. And when you read the article, you will see he talks about planned inefficiencies. So he intentionally wanted the space to be inefficiently designed so that people bump into each other. For example, Satya Nadella, Microsoft Satya Nadella, cautioned against this over-celebration that is happening online, where raw productivity metrics have risen, saying that it's really tough to identify and replicate the value that comes from managing, mentoring, and connecting with people before and after meetings, right? That's where the serendipity happens. That's where ideas collide. That's where people stitch together concepts to create something new. And by definition, we cannot schedule the unplanned. One thing that is also on our mind, for example, at Steelcase internally, is that if you are not physically in an office, how will you ever get promoted, right? The mere action of going into a leadership role or into a management role has so much to do with the network that you've connected. So how are you going to do that if you will be constantly at home? Now, a third and last misconception is that people who work from home have a better work-life balance. Now, working from home has a lot of benefits. No commute. Most of you that are on this call are from Bucharest, so I'm sure you're really enjoying that one. Comfy clothes, more time with your family or pets. But the data reveals that there's also trade-offs when it comes to this. So the reality is that virtual meetings are so much more exhausting than in-person ones. So Zoom fatigue is a concept that is now very popular online, and I know it's ironic we're on a Zoom call, but there is a real exhaustion that people feel from a life that is lived on the screen day in and day out. And it's based in neuroscience. Our brains have to work a lot harder to make sense of the very limited cues we get on screen. So for example, right now, I obviously cannot tell if you're bored, if you're interested, if you're happy, if you're sad. I cannot get any of these cues. So even if this were a much smaller gathering, I would still have to pay so much more attention than in real life to understand your facial expressions, the tone of your voice, the pitch, and your body language. And last but not least, if I am mono-focused, right, if I am focused only on one thing, it does not allow my eyes or my brain to take a break like it can when we are in a physical meeting. So it helps to see people on video, but all this time it makes us feel like we're on a virtual stage, and it pressures us to feel like we have to perform, which makes us obviously tired. So of course we need to set boundaries and transition periods like we would do in real life, but it requires much more effort to do that online. So from our perspective, the office simply cannot go away. It's necessary on multiple levels for our effectiveness, for our sanity, and also for our humanity. And we believe that the best workplace strategies will combine working in an office and working from home. It's not all or nothing or either or. The new ecosystem should include the home office, and even more than before, the office should turn into a destination for community, for identity, and for collaboration. So I will share later today how we think about the future of work and the workplace, but I really want, if I wanted to have one takeaway from today's session, is that this moment in time is really the best moment to start reflecting for your organizations. This virus has provided us with an unexpected but powerful learning opportunity that can and should inform our future work experience. So beyond this adapting to the new normal, right, which we have to, the big question is, how can we transform, how can we reinvent our work experience based on everything that we've learned through the current crisis? I'm sure there's many of you from organizations on this call who thought their company could never work remotely. And the reality is that that's possible, and there's something that we need to do with this information. So the big question is, how are your organizational ambitions shifting because of this crisis? And what is the required culture, the needed processes, the tools and the space to achieve them? So on the right, you see just some of the questions that we're asking ourselves, but also our customers. For example, for which activities, and these are the space related ones, right? So for which activities do my users actually need to be in the office? So which activities should the office support or also no longer support? And for which activities do my users prefer to stay at home, and for which can they stay at home? Because these are two substantially different things. What is the opportunity cost of users coming to the office if you think about how you commute there? And what is the opportunity cost of users being at home if you think about the tools that they lack or the privacy that they might not have? And last but not least, what is the goal, or what should be the goal of a working from home program? Is it employee well-being and safety? And how does that connect with how I am thinking about redesigning the office? So speaking of well-being, that's really the starting point of our post-COVID approach. But before jumping into that, I want to check if there are any questions at this point. And I'm checking the Q&A, and there's no questions. So I don't know if that means that you're all emailing or I'm just being very clear, but please don't hesitate to ask anything, to interrupt, because the goal of today is not to give you all the answers, right? All the answers don't exist. The ideal post-workplace environment does not exist. It's principles that are supposed to start a conversation. It's questions that we need to be asking ourselves in order to find that solution, knowing that that solution will evolve over time. So any questions? All right. So I will then jump into the second part, which is around the post-COVID workplace. And I said that the starting point really is well-being, right? So employee safety and well-being, when we reopen the economy and our workplaces, it's going to be paramount. And it's not only about our people actually being safe, but it's also about our people feeling safe. Because well-being happens when there's this intersection between the physical, the cognitive, and the emotional, and safety is foundational to all three. The physical part is, of course, obvious, but we shouldn't forget that if someone doesn't feel safe, they will be distracted, right? So their cognitive well-being won't be achieved, and they will also be unhappy. So our approach to create the right kind of workplaces for people when they return to the office looks at the time horizons of the now, near, and the far. And for many organizations, also on this call, of course, this will happen in different ways. It will differ across the different geographies that you're responsible for, and it will very much depend on what happens next. But broadly speaking, the now for us is a scenario in which working from home continues. So now, if I jump into what we're doing in Cluj, now is the summer, right? Now people are still at home, the majority of them, and we are retrofitting. We are making sure that we're adhering to the most basic necessary measures by adding some barriers and implementing safety measures. In the near, however, when more people will be coming back, we need to consider reconfiguring the workplace, which means new ways to lay it out, which means changing work settings and offering more longer-term and more flexible solutions. So there's three key design principles that we are working on when doing this, and that is density, the density of the workplace and its population, the geometry of the furniture that we are using, and the division that we can implement using screens, panels, or any other more natural barriers. The far is where it gets more blurry, of course, because the far requires reinvention as science-based evidence and emerging technologies offer more solutions. So in the past, we were designing mainly based on density and cost. And going forward, we need to have the ability to adapt to economic, climate, and health disruptions, which means that you need more space, which you can contract and expand over time. And the reinvented office definitely needs to be designed with the commitment of well-being of people in mind, and knowing that, going back to to the beginning that their physical, their cognitive, and their emotional states are inherently linked to their safety. So some design considerations that we are taking into account, and I won't spend too much time on this because you know them, right? Everyone is talking about them. It's not news that we need to maintain the distance. It's not news that we need to add additional division, and the higher it is, the better in order to prevent the spread of viruses. I will just emphasize a few. As a consequence of adding additional barriers and creating more distance, it is highly recommended that more meetings are actually moved into the open. So if you add barriers like screens or storage and plans, meetings can actually happen outside of the traditional conference room, which by definition makes things safer. Second thing is that desking can be reoriented to a 90-degree angle, as we will show you in Cluj, in order to avoid this face-to-face orientation. And last but not least, not only fixed division is important here, but also movable division that enables users to actually control their level of exposure. So when they want to feel safer, they can, but also when they want to open up, they can also have the option to do that themselves. Of course, more own space is really the direction that we're taking now, because shared spaces and shared workstations bring a lot of challenges in the current environment. And last but not least, we need to pull furniture apart as much as we can. So the spatial part, I think, is relatively clear in terms of the immediate interventions that we need to do. But what I really wanted to emphasize is that there are also considerations around culture and well-being. Biophilia, for example, it's not only beneficial for our health, but it can also act as a natural barrier. Also, we need to think about how we use collaboration tools and how individuals use collaboration tools, and where you need to actually add them as video conferencing becomes more and more present due to the limitations in travel. Working from home definitely needs to be supported. And behavioral protocols need to be put in place to make sure that everyone is and actually feels safe. Last but not least, we definitely need to think of ways to continue fostering community. So I heard someone say the other day that we should stop calling it physical distancing. We should stop calling it social distancing, and we should just call it physical distancing. But for that, we need friendly barriers, right? Because otherwise, the physical distance will definitely result in the actual social capital gap and social distance that we mentioned. So we've reopened our Cluj Business Center on June 9th, so that's 2 days ago, and we want to share with you how we applied some of the thinking that I just shared to ourselves. But again, before I dive into that, I will pause again and see if there are any questions. And still no, oh, yes, 2 questions. Okay, so I'm being told that I have a little background noise. Is that still there? Can someone please confirm if you can still hear me okay? Anyone? Can you still hear me?
Yes, probably if you stay a bit further away from the microphone.
Okay.
There is just a
Could you still understand me?
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, I move a lot when I speak, so that's why this environment is incredibly strange. So probably when you're seeing me, it's like a horror movie, when I approach the camera and go. Okay, so there's a bit of noise, but only sometimes. Some people are saying they can perfectly understand me, and there's a question. So Tiberius is asking, why is the home office the new normal, like the newest invention, the reinvented fusion due to Corona? This should have been normal a long time ago, especially with agile working, activity-based working, etc. Why is this the new revolution? It just shows how rigid and conservative we were as employers up until now. Definitely, right? I mean, the economic crisis, actually, if we go even further back, right, the invention of mobile technology started this conversation. Then the economic crisis started this conversation. And the problem is that we took it to extremes. I don't know if you guys remember this famous Marissa Mayer, CEO Yahoo incident, where she called people back into the office. And initially the story was that, it was to have a shared purpose, for everyone to reconnect and to have a shared purpose. But in the end, it turned out to be a matter of control. Right, so I think trust here and control are very important components of this. And yeah, you're right. This conversation should have happened a long time ago, and the reality is that it has. It's just that we forgot about it. That's also the nature of, in general, of organizational and societal memory. We go through the same loops and cycles, and that's why I'm saying that with this current crisis, I hope that we will finally implement a more sustainable change to the future, where we are flexible and we give people the option without falling into the extremes. So thank you for your comment, and I feel your pain. Valentin says, I think the topic should be remote work, not work from home necessarily. Also a very debated thing right now, right? If I'm working from home, how can you as a company tell me what home is? Can I just not move to Thailand, where my cost of living will be 1/4 of what it was? So I think here it's less easy to decide what's right or wrong, right? It's really up to each company to decide if you are not able to actually reach the office, if that is something that still is okay for the company to fulfill its goals, right? If you really need to come from a different continent. So that will really depend, but this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's an uncomfortable one, right? There's now these famous court cases in Switzerland where employees are bringing companies to court to pay rent, right? Because they're saying, okay, if you're telling me I have to work at home, then you have to pay my rent. There's companies in San Francisco that are telling their employees, we will pay you less if you move further away. So this conversation is just beginning, and the reality is that there's a lot of legal implications, which are not easy to solve, but at least it's getting started. So thank you for your comments. Colin, how crucial is the role of business leaders in consistently implementing the safe environment for their employees, who in some cases may resist or ignore safe working measures? What's your advice to them? Yeah, this is a tricky one because there's also different legislation and different recommendations in different countries. At least for Steelcase, and I guess it's the same for all of you that work for global companies, also your company has a specific recommendation, which means that by definition, leaders should be role models. At Steelcase, everyone needs to wear a mask, and even though that is incredibly annoying, it's being implemented and it's being modeled by our leadership. I will show you some pictures from the Munich office in a few minutes. So yeah, it's really about role modeling, and it's also about being very transparent about the science that is at the basis of our recommendations. Because if you have a recommendation for safety that people don't understand or do not see the purpose of, then you've lost them, right? So you need to have open conversation. Okay, this is what science says. This is why we're doing this. This is why it's important to keep everyone safe. Hope that answers your question, Colin. Any other questions? We still have about 10 minutes in total, so hopefully you will have a bit more. Okay, I will then, together with Andrei, just give you a short glimpse into what's happening in Cluj. So we opened Cluj today. What day is it today? That's another thing with this crisis. It's there's also a psychological term that I now forgot about, forgetting what day it is. Today's Thursday, so on Tuesday, we opened Cluj. And our guiding question when working on restarting the engine, which is how we call the coming back to the office program, was how might we help employees adapt their workspace and their workplace strategy when returning to the office while maintaining a resilient business continuity. So what I shared before about the now, near, and far, and about the design principles, you can find that online in our post-COVID guide. And that was also at the basis of how we handled our own return to the office. So the slides that I will share with you are the same slides that were presented internally to our teams in Cluj a few weeks ago when everything was being communicated and planned. And if you have specific actions about the kind of full picture about going back to the office, which, as you know, includes HR, facilities, etc. If you want to go deeper than the spatial interventions that we've made, we're happy to bring your team with our full team together to have this conversation. So our approach to the now is, which, as I said, is about the summer. Our approach to the now is really around what I'm sure you guys already did. It's around reducing density. We've decided not to change any geometry or add any division in our own space because we were not very compressed to begin with, so we could do that. But we have slightly adjusted our shared spaces. Work from home is still the norm. There's visual cues. We have much smaller meetings. And of course, we clean frequently and visibly, and masks really are the norm. And the plan is to, for now, 30% of the population is able to safely return to the office. The near starts first and foremost with changing geometry and adding division. So work from home will continue to a large extent, as only 70% of people can actually come back. But we will give people the choice to have their own workspace if they don't feel comfortable sharing with others, to have access to cleaning tools to encourage them to clean their space before they begin working. And if spaces must be shared, then they should be reservable for longer periods of time, again, with this new practice of thoroughly cleaning between usage. We will also introduce furniture that can be easily moved and reconfigured. This will allow people to distance themselves from others as needed, or it will allow us as a company to increase the density when virus transmission is less of a concern. So the near for us is 3 to 12 months. It all depends on when the vaccine is actually going to be available. Also, mobile power will be provided in areas where power is not available, such as cafes or open areas, which can be redeployed to support individual work. Last but not least, open areas will become the new conference room by using mobile technology and movable screens with stools, so we can create a little space where people can naturally distance themselves and meet without feeling stuck in an enclosed space where air circulation is a bit of a challenge. And the extra advantage is that standing and moving is proven to boost creativity by 60%, so that makes it easier to get back to innovating while you're actually distanced from each other. And in the far, so that's 12 months plus from now, we definitely will need time to understand how people actually are feeling, what science is learning, and how technologies that are emerging are going to help us define the future of the workplace. We have some ideas, definitely. Oh, another question. I'll come back to it in a second, Sorina. So to mention just two things that are top of mind. So first of all, we will no longer design our spaces for permanence, but we will design them to change easily, to expand and to contract, so that work areas can accommodate more or less distancing. And secondly, as travel will continue to be less frequent and the office will need to integrate even more virtual experience so people can connect across distances, we will need to improve this remote collaboration. So seeing facial reactions and body language is, yes, it will be Valentin. The presentation will be sent to you. Thank you for that comment. So by seeing facial reactions and being able to read the room, it's less likely for people to be multitasking, for interrupting, and for speaking. So these two things are really on our mind. How can we be more adaptable, and how can we better support remote collaboration? So very quickly, because I see that we are running a bit out of time. So at the moment, as I said, we're 37% of people can come back to the office now, but we're aiming for 30%. In the near, it's 76% max. At 70 will really be as many as we would like to have back in the office. As I mentioned before, behavior and space are completely inherently connected, right? So we will need to actually train people on how to be using the new space. And making sure that they are actually still collaborating and interacting even though they are socially distanced. And on the 6th floor, just to give you some visuals, and these are slides that we can of course share. At the moment, if we don't make any changes, only 16 people can actually come back. Whereas if we make some interventions by reorienting some furniture and separating some desks, already 36 people can come back. We can make their lives even better by adding some fixed and mobile screens and adding some additional biophilia so that they're also more shielded from the corridor. The mobile panels, as I mentioned, will enable them to determine how shielded they actually want to be themselves. Our shared spaces, of course, in meeting rooms, we will reduce the amount of occupancy. And in our work cafe, which is the place where people actually come together to socialize and to rejuvenate and to collaborate, we will need to make some interventions. This is the work cafe now. This is how it was initially designed, right? So here you see that our furniture is already quite flexible, which means that the level of intervention that we needed to make for the now was not big, and the now and the near are kind of close together in the sense that, yes, we're using division, we're changing the geometry, and we're reducing density. I will switch quickly back and forth so that you see again what I mean. So spaces that were initially for 4 are becoming for 2. Spaces in these islands in the middle not only serve as barriers from each other, but they also serve to guide circulation. Because of course, a very important part of new layouts are how you guide the circulation. So this one-way circulation that everyone is talking about, and these spaces definitely help us to achieve that. I'm just checking the time. We just have 2 more minutes left. Just a few pictures of Munich from yesterday. So also please don't share these because they are not yet, they will be part of a case study about our Learning and Innovation Center. We opened it last week on the 2nd of June, also to our customers. And I just wanted to show you a few visuals of how individual work is happening now, and also how we are leveraging our shared spaces. Here, I just want to point out a very small but powerful thing. So instead of using things like red tape and making it aggressively obvious that you shouldn't sit somewhere, you can also use natural elements or kind of interior design elements to prevent people from sitting somewhere, and that makes things a lot more natural. So last but not least, what's next? How do we actually design for the future? And it's really just a very, very brief overview of what will be published next week. But I just wanted to take the opportunity of today to give you this glimpse. So as I mentioned, home office and the actual office, they need to create some kind of an ecosystem in the future. And a lot of organizations are already publicly acknowledging that, like Apple, Google, or Verizon. Based on our research, we're putting together these 5 strategies to help organizations create the kinds of workplaces that can adapt to changing circumstances and that can also support people to be productive and to feel a sense of belonging at work. So I will not go into too many details about each of them, but offering even more choice and control is key. Having a broad range of spaces within the office, as well as satellite spaces, whether they are the home office or other types of real estate, because in the end, employee engagement and workplace satisfaction are completely connected. This notion of no longer having fixed architecture and furniture, but moving to something more fluid is really key for the future, because you need to adapt not as a user as well, not just led by facilities, and you need to be able to do it quickly. Focusing on the me within we. Already before this crisis, there were a lot of complaints about not being able to achieve focused work in the office. So as we bring people back with the purpose of collaborating, we need to be mindful of not making that problem even bigger, right? We need to make sure that there's places to relax, to focus. Oof, there's so many more questions. Collaboration spaces need to become high performing, definitely. These lounge areas that we've designed prior to the crisis, when work actually needed to be done, you still went to somewhere that had a table and had the proper ergonomics. So when we design collaboration spaces, whether they are more inspiring or not, they should be inspiring and functional. And last but not least, the physical and the digital need to be better merged together, not only to measure what is actually happening in the office with occupancy data, but also to enable remote collaboration, as hopefully we will all travel less and also make the planet a better place. So I will I know that we are running a bit out of time. I will try to answer the 3 questions that are still here. What about companies' culture? We all know that most of big companies are quite vocal when it comes to their organizational culture. I don't see it happening by working from home. Maybe it's not a priority, but it would be in the far, because otherwise company culture might fade away. Fully agreed, right? So it's not either or. It's not only be at home, only be in the office. It's a matter of having the option to be at home, but definitely presence in the office to some extent is required to actually build connection and build belonging. So for now, we have to stay at home. And what I'm saying is that we need to take the information that we're learning about our ability to stay at home to inform how we can balance that better in the future. How is it decided in your case who is coming back to the office and who would still work remotely? So for the now, it's on a voluntary basis. For the near, it could continue to be on a voluntary basis. This is something that we are currently analyzing, right? Which activities actually teams need to perform in the office and which they need to perform at home. So it will be a combination of making it transparent, how space can support what people do and what people actually want to do. Because even if we force people to come back, if they don't feel comfortable, that will have an impact on how they perform. I guess that common viruses such as the flu have always had an impact on absenteeism and infection of colleagues will also be dramatically reduced. Is it fair to say that these new safe designs in the workplace will be with us permanently? I really hope so. So now it's really up to technological advances to create surfaces and materials that are not only cleanable, but are also preventable in terms of the spread of disease. So I really hope that this will not be a moment in time where we don't learn and eventually we also forget within a cycle of about 7 to 10 years, as it usually happens. So design is really, this is a great moment for design, right? Because everything is blurry, you need solutions, and it's now a good challenge for many industries and many innovators out there. So I would like to very much thank you for your time. We know that everything is in motion and will continue being in motion. And the last 3 months were all about the virus, what I called virus centered. And our aim is really to support organizations to spend the next months by being user centered. So I hope that this session sparked some questions. Either that you've shared already with me or that hopefully you will take back to have internal conversations on how to plan for the near and the far. And in the famous words of Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. We definitely need to learn from this. And if there's anything we can do to help, please let us know. Feel free to contact me, Elena, or Andre and Andre after this session. So if any of you still have some minutes and want to ask some more questions, I'm happy to stay. I'm looking at the Q&A. There's nothing so far. I'm going to stop the presentation in the hopes that I can at least see some faces again after 49 minutes of looking at a screen. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, perfect. All we want is your questions, right? This is really the beginning of an important conversation, not about, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen and how. Thank you, Ramona.
So if I may, Ilinca, just to get a bit further in the discussion, because I know we still have another 10 minutes left. There is also one idea to be discussed, because of course there are all these misconceptions about having this situation now, and we know it's been sort of a crisis thing because we got into this problem solving mode, and we are really solving this mathematically, and we are getting out of focus with actual human beings, and this is the greatest opportunity to actually pay more attention on well-being. I know for the last time well-being was indeed in focus, but it was more like a trend, more like a topic that needed to be introduced and things that were nice to have and adding some value. But now well-being is actually being perceived for what it actually means, and better understanding what the benefits of it for the people. And in the end, considering these benefits is really important for the company itself. I mean, companies are made of people, so it's really important to take care of this and be mindful of it. And I think personally, and talking also to a lot of people and a lot of questions being raised, what do we do? What do we do now? Well, of course, no one knows exactly. There is no recipe, and because there is no recipe at this point, it's actually an idea of having everything designed to better suit the activities that every company is actually having or needing to be solved by space or different work styles. I mean, it's just reframing actually the problem, because some of the solutions that we get to see, and now most of the offices and spaces look like construction sites. You have everywhere signage showing you that you need to be 2 meters away, you need to wear your mask, you need to wash your hands. We feel like little children in getting trained. So this is some sort of an adjusting period. And we know also from design-wise, we're thinking, and just a short comparison, if you have this long, narrow corridor that it's all full white and you go through it, it's just an area that you don't perceive it as being something nice to pass through. But if you fit it with pictures or any landmarks that gives you an impression of passing through space, you just get this sensation of space and scale. And just using this type of elements and design principles to actually introduce scale into the surroundings actually takes away all these signs, for instance, that you get for having 2 meters to stay away from one person to the other. So it's just getting more acquainted with this type of actions that you need to take, which are basically common sense. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, be mindful of the people around you. And yeah, it's nothing particularly new. It's just the way that it's framed and the way that it's been shown and marketed and showcased all over the news and everything is just the actual reason for this type of reaction. But I think it's just a matter of time till we get used to ideas that actually will become the norm. And of course, the best advantage of this period is that we really got a good shove forward towards evolution. So even though there were some studies being conducted last year and even during the winter of seeing how companies can have employees working from home, well, they just went through a pilot free of charge to see if it works and how well the company is prepared for flexibility and actual mobility for their organization. So there is a lot of information to take, as well as companies that can get that information. And of course, we can help also together to design the space that best suits your needs. It's not a one size fits all, definitely not. And in the end, because we're thinking about people and it's human-centered design that we're having in focus now, we need to have a solution that actually works. Having hazmat suits and this type of conditions so that you're 100% protected will definitely not have people coming in back in the office or any other public space for that matter.
Yeah, somebody made an analogy to me the other day that they think about going back to the office like going to one of those very awkward gyms, where people don't really they stay away from you. You always have to clean everything, and it's sterile, and it's just not nice. So yeah, there's of course the potential trap of actually getting into that future, which hopefully we will not get into, and I don't think we will, right? Because people will fight back. Nobody wants to work from that type of environment. But yes, you're perfectly right. This is a moment of uncertainty, but it's within this uncertainty that you shouldn't jump to solutions, right? It's the moment to ask, okay, why? What are we trying to achieve as an organization? What kind of culture do we want? What processes need to support that culture? To create that culture, do we need to have every single person every day from 8:30 or 9 to 5 in the office, or can people choose based on what they're doing? How will the office accommodate? Do we still need rooms for 40 people if you're calling me into the office to be part of an informational 40-person meeting and sit in a room with 39 other people, I'm probably not going to do that. So it's all these things that we need to think about when we design. Also, if I need to create something with 2 or 3 other people, I will probably make the effort in actually going to the office.
Sure. So we got one more question. So what are we saying is that what we shouldn't be focusing only on short-term solutions based on the urgency feeling inspired by the current situation, but measures that can be integrated naturally into the design thinking for office spaces. Well, I think, and also what you've seen, also what Steelcase has done in Cluj, and what we've done here in Bucharest, and what most of the offices actually did, is just taking actions that are kind of imposed. So you need to have this physical distancing at this point. You need to wear the masks. You need to have these screens that offer some protection. And even with the screens, it's not necessarily the protection itself. It's just the idea of for you to be more aware that you need to have this distancing, or that you're not compliant with this distance for that certain space. Because let's say, for instance, if you make a comparison to screens that you usually get in open space environments, it's not 100% helping the acoustics of the room. Most of the people, when they find themselves surrounded with the soundproofing elements, they tend to talk louder. So they get this false sense of isolation, and they just don't get into actually respecting others. So indeed, in the end, it's just an idea of culture. But of course, the point now is not to tear out the entire office spaces that already exist. It's just to have a gradually intervention on these existing spaces, so that they can provide the proper space for the activities needed to take place in office spaces.
Yeah. So thank you so much for all your questions. So this session was actually supposed to end at 45 past, so sorry about that. I really wanted to include this part of our unpublished research with the misconceptions and with our 5 strategies. And I only, for full disclosure, only decided to include that yesterday, because that's when I got permission to do so, even though it wasn't launched. So I was a bit ambitious with the amount of information to share, but again, hopefully it sparked some questions, and we're happy to continue this conversation. Keep an eye out for this research next week, and happy to share more about how to inform your thinking about your workplace strategy, because that's the thinking part is really the important part. So thank you so much. Looking forward to connecting with some of you after this, and have a great, glorious day where hopefully you go outside, because that's my main challenge during this pandemic. I've become an indoor cat, and that's not very healthy. So go outside and have a fantastic Thursday.
Thank you all. Have a great day.